Production, take one.
Hi, welcome back to the Media Production Club podcast.
Hi.
It's me, Grace, back for our first episode of the semester.
Yes.
With Sarah.
Hi.
Say hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
It's so funny.
I know.
So today we are going to be talking about Spencer, starring Kristen Stewart. You know, it's directed and written by a few people, but who cares about them when you have Kristen Stewart?
Okay.
We're not getting into it yet.
All right, that's fair.
We do have some house cleaning first before we start our analysis and synopsis of the whole movie. We do obviously put on this podcast as a part of our media production club here, which of course Sarah's a co-president of, and I am the secretary of. So we wanted to advertise our meetings. We are meeting Wednesdays at 4.
So far, we may change.
For now, it may change according to like the majority of the club's needs. We do have a Discord, so you can email either of us or hit up our Instagram page to get an invite to the Discord if you're interested in joining. You know, we have a lot of projects and goals for the semester that we're trying to get done, and obviously any work is good work to go and like get experience and get in your portfolio if you're interested in any kind of media production.
We do already have a few projects in line. Nothing set in stone yet, but we do have opportunities for people to have experience already lined up.
And of course, to quote Mr. Williams, it's not about what you know, always, it's about what you can do. So obviously, you're a student, you need to get some experience under your belt on your resume and in your portfolio if you're trying to work in media production at all. But yeah, do you have anything else you wanted to say about the club?
Our Instagram is at AUG_MPC.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wanted to DM us on that to get an invite to the Discord, definitely do that. I believe we'll have links to everything if you're on YouTube or if you're on Spotify.
Yes.
Listening to this. So definitely check those out.
Yep, that's all we had to say about that. So, of course, we're covering Spencer in this episode. It was directed by Pablo Larrain, written by Stephen Knight, and it came out just last year on September 3rd. It was actually aired at the Venice International Film Festival, and it was a screen for international release in theaters on November 5th. The U.S. distributor I thought was really interesting was Neon, which they did the distribution also here in the US for I, Tonya, Ingrid Goes West, Parasite, which Parasite we did show at the cinema series.
2019?
No, it was 2020. It was almost 2 years ago. It was the last cinema series. No, it was the second to last one before COVID happened. So
right.
I just thought it was a fun little coincidence that almost 2 years later, exactly, another Neon film.
Yeah.
But if you know about Neon as like a distributor, they have like kind of a certain MO of films. You know, I don't know if you've watched any of like Ingrid Goes West or I, Tonya or
no,
any. It's definitely very on par with their past work. I think they're a really good studio. But yeah, I just thought it was an interesting little tidbit. And a summary of Spencer is it's following 3 pivotal days in Princess Diana's life during December of 1991. It's during her Christmas holidays with the royal family at the Sandringham Estate in Norfolk, England. She's struggling with her mental health problems, and she's deciding to end like her now decade-long marriage to Prince Charles, which everyone kind of, not everyone, but it's very common knowledge of like...
It's very obvious.
Her and Charles were kind of an arranged type thing. She was 10 years younger than him when they got married, and in the royal family, divorce is definitely taboo. They don't marry with plans of ever being divorced, so it's definitely a lot of really heavy subject matter. A warning before we go in depth with the film, this film does deal with some things that may be triggering to people. There are like explicit references to and depictions of self-harm through like physical self-harm and also eating disorder. It does depict it very explicitly. It is on the screen and it is not only alluded to. So if those things could trigger you, please don't watch this film, and please do not listen to our in-depth synopsis of the film, because we're going to be talking about when it happens in the film.
I've never been super into like the royal family and
Oh, I know everything about this.
Oh,
I love the tea.
I almost know nothing.
Really?
Really, I've never paid attention to it. I've never been interested in it. It's never been like a thing that I was drawn to in any way, shape, or form. I'm not around for the drama usually. And seeing this film was very interesting, very enlightening about like the struggles of being, royal and being kind of thrown into this position of power without really knowing what you're getting into.
Well, I think it's interesting, like when you talk about power, like the dynamic of being quote unquote in a position of power, but she is powerless.
That's true.
They literally, they control everything down to like what she wears and when. So she is kind of in a position of power. She is in like this position where she does have access to a lot of wealth and everything, but she doesn't even control her own life.
It's very much an image of power. It is not an actual position of power.
Because obviously, like, she married into it.
Right.
Also. And she is not a part of the firm by blood. Because they call it the firm. The royal family and the monarchy, they call it the firm. I don't know if you know that.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So she's not a part of it by blood. And obviously, there is, like, this sense of otherness and everything that she experiences.
She's very much just a producer of heirs, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was a role for most of the women, unless you were the one in the line of succession. But even then, obviously, in the past, the monarchy has never been kind
It's not to say that that's a unique position to be in the royal family, but it's very much obvious. Well, it's actually less obvious in this film because she's already had 2 children.
Yes.
And so it's 2 sons at that. And so it's not emphasized, but it is obvious that was her role, and then now she's kind of done,
Yeah.
Like her job has been fulfilled.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting with this film about Princess Diana because obviously there has been many adaptations of Diana's life. There's been obviously many books written about her coming from interviews she did, people who knew her, people who worked within the royal household, like butlers, maids, drivers, bodyguards have come out and given interviews about what it was like for her behind the scenes of what they saw. So there's been a lot of media coming out about it. I think especially in the last few years, people are kind of revisiting her story, and I think it's a lot different this time though because of the direction they chose to go in. It's more of a psychological thriller than just a biopic. And of course, there's a little asterisk we have to put in there. It's not true to life, one for one what happened in history. It is kind of historical fiction.
It's a dramatization.
Yes. It is sensationalized a bit. This is not a film to watch if you're looking for the history of what happened exactly. This is an artistic adaptation of what they believe her life was like, especially towards the end of her marriage with Prince Charles.
Right. If you've ever seen the show Larrain on the CW, that's what it's kind of like. Now, this is obviously much more recent in history and probably could have been more accurate.
And a lot less romanticized than Larrain.
Right. It's, it's a lot more artistic license than most depictions of Diana's life. And I think that's kind of what I thought about a lot. You were saying that it's kind of a sensationalized, and I don't know that Diana ever struggled with hallucinations, because she does hallucinate in this film. She
did struggle a lot with mental health,
right?
And they say in the film that she's cracking up, and they believe that she was in real life. She did talk about her struggle with mental health, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if she hallucinated, but I will say, and again, trigger warning for eating disorder, but when you are depriving yourself of food and nutrients, and a lot of the time rest, because obviously they had a full schedule. She was having to do all kinds of things for the royal family. When you combine all that, they did send her to a doctor. From what I understand, she probably was medicated for different mental health issues she had. I would say it isn't far-fetched to say she could have been hallucinating, but obviously it's not factual.
Right.
Like 100%. Nobody knows that except probably her, and if, her psychiatrist or whoever knew that about her. But I think it's very interesting to kind of draw a comparison to her and Anne Boleyn. Throughout the film. I think she feels almost kinship with Anne Boleyn. She feels they're kind of alike because Anne Boleyn was obviously, she married into the royal family. She married Henry VIII. This was centuries ago. I can't remember. It was like during the Tudor era, which was like between the 13th and like 15th century-ish, something like that. And she married in. She couldn't really produce the heir that they needed. So he was like, I'm moving on and I'm gonna behead you and frame you for having an affair when you really didn't. But I think there is this woman on TikTok, I can't remember her name, who it's like her life's mission to change the narrative around Anne Boleyn's story, that she wasn't some flighty, airheaded woman who seduced the King of England to become queen. That wasn't her goal. She actually did not want to be involved with Henry VIII. She left court to stay away from him and everything. So I don't know if the people who made this film knew that, because a lot of people still don't know that.
I was always under the impression that Anne Boleyn died because she couldn't produce a male heir.
No, actually, she was trying to start a rival council, the Queen's Council, to start like basically welfare in whatever form of welfare you could provide. Way back then, she was trying to form her own council of people, and she was trying to do like a lot of welfare reform. It's very interesting. She wasn't just like some, very airheaded lady like she is portrayed to be.
She was a woman of substance.
Yes, and she was like, well, I'm the queen. I have my own political agenda, and it was actually to help the poor, and she wasn't like super materialistic and shitty like everybody kind of thought she was. And I think that about Diana too. I think the royal family tried to kind of demonize her a little bit.
They vilified her, for sure.
They would get the sympathy instead of her. And this, the girl on TikTok, she's also like an actual historian. She isn't just some random chick on TikTok. She wrote a book. It's really good. It's called Anne Boleyn, 500 Years of Lies by Haley Nolan. But I thought it was really interesting, and I really hope that the writer and director of Spencer knew the actual story of Anne Boleyn, because I think it makes it that much better to know the actual story and draw those comparisons between them. Because Diana was like the people's princess. She did like a lot for people who were disenfranchised in that time. I don't know if you ever saw, like obviously in the 80s, the AIDS crisis was enormous. She did so much work for gay people and people with AIDS, because people wouldn't even touch you if you had AIDS, if you were even gay. She visited a hospital with AIDS patients, and she shook a man's hand, and people were like, oh my god. They really thought that it was so contagious almost that you could just shake somebody's hand and get it. But she did like so much work for people like that, and then other types of charity work. So I think there's a stronger parallel than people realize between her and Anne Boleyn.
Right. It almost makes me think about her death, because she died in a car accident, right?
Yes.
I mean, obviously this is very conspiratorial and very, probably untrue, but it does make me think that, her death, I don't know.
There's a lot of conspiracy theories
suspicious, a little
that
sus.
the royal family killed her. And there's a really weird, I think it was a note or something she wrote within a year of her dying. She predicted her death. She's like, I'm gonna die, they're gonna kill me, it's gonna be a car crash or something crazy like that. Not exact words, but there is a note that Diana wrote to somebody.
That's
and was
insane.
But to be fair, a really big theme in the film obviously is the paparazzi photographers. Her whole life was being watched, and the paparazzi was hounding her, and they were chasing her car. So her driver was speeding, going crazy. Her driver was also drunk. So I'm not gonna say whether I believe or don't believe personally that she was killed, because I don't want the royal family to kill me or something. No, I'm joking. They obviously wouldn't care about a tiny little podcast at a university in Georgia.
4 viewers.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna give any substance to that, because
right, and
it's just, I think it's almost detrimental to her story, because people focus on the conspiracy of it and not her as a person in her life.
Right. She was very much a victim, and I think we should focus on what we do know about her being a victim of, these mental health disorders and
well, she was also
pressure.
Very much a victim of the family, because I mean, obviously obviously everything about their relationship was publicized, but it was very much like glossed over that she was 19 and Prince Charles was like 30 or 31 when they got together. And they got engaged after only knowing each other for a few months, and he met her when he was dating her older sister and she was underage.
Okay.
Yeah. So she's definitely a victim in many ways. She was a victim in that she was not a child, but like how mature. I'm 21. My brain is not fully developed right now. My brain will not be fully developed for 4 more years. But at 19, like you're barely out of high school.
Right.
I graduated and turned 19 like 5 months later. You are nearly still a child. You are legally an adult, but mentally you're not as far as you're gonna go. So like getting tossed into that after just barely not being a child anymore, it's really gross. And I think that they did that on purpose. They wanted someone young, they wanted someone fresh to give the royal family like a new fresh-faced ambassador for the family.
Oh yes, a beautiful, fresh-faced, very pretty, very innocent
girl.
Yes.
Yeah, and because obviously people have been talking about the monarchy and how archaic it is for years and years now. It was especially interesting to see within the past century, especially around that time when people were kind of rethinking like, what's the point of the monarchy? It's a bunch of like old people.
Every single one
outdated.
Of them. Basically every single one of them is just a figurehead. Like,
yeah.
The parliament and the prime minister, those are the rulers of the country.
Yeah.
The queen might have some say, some pull, some push, whatever. But for the most part, they don't do anything. And I think going back to like how Diana didn't have any power, there was this part in the movie, it's kind of near the end, but I was watching it with my boyfriend and he noticed that she goes up to this house and this house has never been renovated. Like this was a house that Diana grew up in and she goes to see it at the end of the movie or near the end of the movie and it has never been renovated. It's never been made safe. There's been nothing done to it since she lived there when she was a child.
Yeah.
And in the position that Diana is in, she should have the ability to tell somebody, hey, I want my old house fixed up so I can, just see it. Like I don't have to live there. Nobody has to live there. It doesn't have to be open to the public, but just I want to go through it. I want to look at it. I want to remember what it was to be a child,
Yeah.
And it was very interesting to see that she didn't have that ability apparently because, she always talked about this house. She went there multiple times during this movie, or she tried to go multiple times. And also while she was in this house, she kind of has this moment where she's like, I'm going to fall down the stairs and kill myself.
Yeah.
And I thought that was going back to like how conspiratorial, her death may or may not have been. You said that she might have predicted her death.
Yeah. Well, it is true that she attempted suicide, throwing herself down the stairs. Obviously, it didn't happen in that way, and she didn't actually attempt it at that moment in the film, but she did do that, and I do think that she was purposefully neglected and purposefully not given the help she needed. I don't know if they truly wanted her to off herself, but it's like, what do you think is going to happen if you neglect somebody who you brought into this huge thing that she didn't really know what she was getting into? She didn't really understand the whole, because how at 19 can you get married and you're just not envisioning the rest of your life and how long your life really is.
Right.
And she obviously didn't know what she was getting into until she got engaged to Prince Charles, and she immediately had to just drop everything she'd been doing at the time. She was working at like a kindergarten or something. She was living in an apartment in London, like a college student with a bunch of her friends. She immediately had to stop doing all that. She was hounded by the paparazzi and everything. And these are very much like formative years of her life. And she's being neglected. Her husband's having an affair, very obviously, has eyes for another woman. The whole family is like, well, deal with it. That's like what happens. Kings have mistresses and whatever. You're not allowed to seek comfort anywhere else though, but you can just deal with it. And she obviously just didn't know what she was getting into. And it's really sad to see like the effects it had on her over the years and how she really was like building up so much and bottled up inside until she had to snap pretty much.
And it did kind of make me think that maybe her death wasn't the result of someone else's planning, but maybe her own. And, maybe to make it so much that it wasn't her children knowing that she committed suicide or something like that. It was kind of like a mercy to her family. And
I think it made me think a lot about like the power dynamics and everything and the way they depicted her story and why it's becoming so popular right now. Because when you think of like the whole Free Britney movement, like a lot of the ways that we thought about and the narratives we wrote about women who are actually the victims in situations, revisiting them now, because a lot of people watch Britney Spears shave her own head, attack paparazzi, cry in a booth of a restaurant with her child in her arms because she just couldn't get away from them, and then like have her whole life taken away from her when her father got, you know, like the conservatorship over her. It just, I think it's really timely after we're talking about like Me Too and stuff like that, that people are like revisiting the way that the public has treated women. But I think we're also seeing a very dangerous like resurgence of the same type of treatment that Diana got from the paparazzi with like obviously her child, Harry, and his wife, Meghan. And I think it's really sad knowing what's been happening today with the treatment of her children in the press and knowing, you know, what happened to her. And ultimately, either way, like whatever, it was an accident or the royal family had a hand in her death. Definitely the paparazzi had a hand in her death. Either way, if it was an accident or not.
Yes, very much
because
so.
Even if she had ultimately taken her own life, a huge thing that contributed to her mental health going down like the drain pretty much was her treatment by the press. They treated her like, in the movie she says, like currency.
Yes.
Really gross to think about. She realized that. And of course, obviously that's not a real quote taken from Diana, but you know, like she was an intelligent woman in her own right. So I'm sure she probably likened it to that in her own mind.
There's a quote from the movie that was really interesting where Alistair, or the really creepy guy, Major whatever his face, Major Gregory.
Yeah.
He came up to her and was like, you need to close your curtains because you were dressing and undressing in front of open curtains. And she was like, well, I'll keep them open if I want, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, okay, but paparazzi got some powerful cameras. They got some powerful lenses. And she was like, yeah, well, they're not lenses, they're microscopes, and I'm just an insect. And they're pulling off my wings and my legs. I thought that was one of the most powerful quotes of the entire movie, other than also the Queen's quote that was like, the only picture that they take of you that matters is your picture on the 10-pound note. Then you realize that all you are is currency. Like when you mentioned that about currency. And it was also very powerful to me.
Yeah, I think it's a lot. It's definitely commentary on how women are commodified by the press, by media, in a way that men just have never been. Obviously, like, where is the press hounding and looking for scandal on Prince Charles? He was the one having an affair. Diana was getting all the press. Obviously, after the affair did come out and was obvious to the public, he did give an interview about it, but people were hounding Diana for no particular reason other than like, oh, we just need pictures. We want to know literally everything about her life. And I think that it's really important for people to note that celebrities were not as accessible back then as they are today. Obviously, you can literally see some of the most intimate, like personal moments of celebrities' lives today because of social media, but back then, all you saw was what they put out themselves or like what paparazzi got.
Mostly illegally, because they would stalk her. They would come onto their private property.
Yeah.
And it was very much a problem, but it was all the same put into the public's eye and given this spotlight that was not deserved and was not at all appropriate. And it just made these pictures have so much more of a visceral reaction from the public. Like, oh, they did something wrong to get this picture. That's so much more exciting than this,
the very like manicured and planned out
social media
Christmas or like the Christmas cards that the royal family does every year. You see them taking a photo in front of the Christmas tree that Diana comes and walks to. That's with their consent and everything. But the public doesn't want that. They want the scoop. They want the juicy things that they don't want us to see.
That was a very interesting scene. I also noticed that the only two people who were wearing, I think there were like 3 or 4 women out of like 12 people in this picture. Mm-hmm. And it was the Queen and Diana and like 1 or 2 other women, and then men, all males. And then it was very interesting because Diana and the Queen were the only 2 people wearing color. I think Diana was wearing like a teal skirt and like a shirt with polka dots. And then the Queen was wearing like this lavender kind of set. And I think it was very interesting because it kind of put them in the same position.
Well, at the time, Diana was the future queen before she divorced Charles.
Right. And it just kind of like, I think it put them in the same position. It kind of tied them together in the sense that the Queen also had to go through this with her husband, I'm sure. But
yeah, her husband did also have an affair when they were younger.
So she kind of has been through the same thing. She obviously handled it a bit differently, and she didn't suffer with as many or as severe mental health issues. I'm sure she had her moments where
but she definitely is a part of like a mindset that especially like older generations had of mental health problems are not real problems. And honestly, there are older people today who even believe mental health issues are pretty much like non-existent.
There are people that are
just pick yourself up and keep going.
There are people that are less than 40 years old who believe that.
Yeah. But I think it's definitely like a notion that comes from older generations.
Right. What people were pushing Diana to do is act on all of her impulses.
I think so. I think they only wanted her to, when Charles in the film, he says there's two versions of each of them.
Right.
He has two versions, his dad has two versions, she should have two versions, and there's her at home and her who is the real her and her that they take the photos of. And I think they wanted her to, in public, be able to just basically wipe all of her actual personality and her own issues away and like leave them at the door, so to say. But in private, they really didn't care if she spiraled as long as she could, you know, put the makeup on, put the nice pretty dress on, and go out for a photo op.
And put the right dress on. Because, oh my lord, she went to Christmas morning church and, you know, she was wearing the Boxing Day lunch dress.
Well, like, it's very interesting when you think of like how Diana is a style icon, but her most iconic looks were her reclaiming like her power of everyone knows about the revenge dress she wore to like after she had split from Charles. I don't know if they had divorced yet. It's a black dress. She looked stunning, of course. But she wore it and everyone was like, he should be so sorry for look what he just lost. Because Camilla Parker Bowles, his lady he was having an affair with, like literally clownery, 100%. But it's like through her life she did use her style and her clothing, the way she dressed, as kind of her own form of power. It's very important to the royal family of like their looks, the image they portray to the public. So when she was able to break away from that, she kind of dressed however she wanted, and she was always in the papers like, oh my god, that's so scandalous, she's wearing biker shorts to drop off her kids to school. Because everyone knows the iconic like pictures of her wearing the big crew necks and biker shorts and tennis shoes dropping off the princes to school and stuff like that. But then there's like a parallel I would draw to Kate Middleton, of course Prince William's wife. It's very interesting to see how she dressed before she was like properly engaged in dating William to now. She was kind of like a party girl. She was like in the party scene at college and stuff like that. And there's photos of her with her own style before she and him got serious. And then as soon as like the royal family started handling her PR, she dressed like in church clothes every single day.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same with Diana until she got out and then she was like, well, I'm kind of reclaiming my own image and everything. And I think that it's very interesting. Obviously, I'm not going to assume why she self-harmed or why she developed an eating disorder. Obviously, I'm sure there was a pressure to look perfect all the time, but I think it's about control also. She had virtually no autonomy about anything in her life, except for she could control her weight. She could control herself, like hurting herself. And I think that was kind of what they were trying to evoke in the movie a little bit, because she had no control over her body except for when she was basically harming it.
Yeah, it did seem like, first of all, she did go up to the queen one time and say, I really liked your dress. And the queen was like, well, it wasn't the one I was supposed to wear or whatever.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting because that kind of also pulled together the Christmas card scene where they're both wearing color. And also, I read that Princess Diana had said that she struggled with bulimia when her husband had made a comment about her being quote unquote chubby. And that's kind of like what kind of started this snowball effect and like her binging and then purging. So that was kind of, I think it was mostly pressure from her husband. It didn't help. Like the paparazzi didn't help. Mm-hmm. You know, the pressure from the rest of the family didn't help. But that's like what started it was her husband saying that, which I can understand is a very much a real pressure to have, to be physically attractive or physically just perfect almost for your partner. You know, that's kind of an interesting aspect that they put in the film.
I know that part of it was she always kind of had to compete for his love and his affection. And I think it, obviously in the movie, she says that he gave her the same necklace for Christmas as he gave his mistress. And she's always kind of comparing herself and trying to be like the best she could be for him. So maybe like if I look a certain way, if I dress a certain way, if I do my makeup and my hair just right and follow all the rules, he'll love me more finally. But I think at this point it was very apparent to her that that was never gonna happen.
Right.
Because on Christmas Day, like she looks over and who is there in the crowd who went to the royal family's personal like church service? His mistress. Like obviously there was just, at that point she knew there was just no way that she was gonna salvage her marriage.
Yeah. And also I feel like Maggie almost perpetuated that. And she was always just being like, be beautiful, be the best. Just know that you're beautiful. But also like try.
I think she was kind of trying to encourage her to play their game, but like beat them at their own game, you know? But I think you could argue definitely that it was misguided because how could she really understand what Diana was going through unless she was in her shoes? So I think that the people around her meant well and they truly wanted her to feel better and, you know, not be suffering so much. But like the royal family is the royal family and they basically have a say on her whole life. And of course, like divorce, nobody saw as an option. So I think that they were like, well, you're never gonna escape this. There's no way you'll ever get divorced. There's no way you can get out of this. So you might as well just participate and do what they say. And like maybe they'll loosen the reins on you. They'll cut you some slack. So, you know, you can find some happiness within the institution of the family, but only if you follow their rules.
And also, you know, Maggie does admit her love for Diana at the end.
Yeah.
Which also makes me wonder, like, why she was trying to push her to play this game that way. She does I think she does suggest to see a doctor, but, like, I feel like that should have been, that's not how I would have handled it, I guess. But that's also just very much, I'm not in that position and I'm not that person. But it does seem a bit odd that she would claim to love Diana and then kind of not really do anything.
Yeah.
Like, she just kind of told her to be beautiful, easy breezy cover girl, you know what I'm saying? Like, that was kind of the end of her advice. That was the end of her help.
Yeah, and I think
not that she could do much, actually, because, you know, she was just the dresser.
Yeah, but I think again it was like everyone encouraging Diana to just live her life within the confines of like what the crown and the royal family wanted her to do, because they just never imagined a way for her to not do that, because divorce was just like completely out of the question for them. But I think that that was part of like what the psychological thriller aspect of everyone was telling her, like, just participate, just do as they say and you'll be all right. And she's like, I've literally been trying to do this for years and years and years, and guess what? My husband still loves another woman. The family still ices me out. The only people that are happy to see me at Christmas right now are my children. Mm-hmm. And I think that that was part of the thing. It was almost like they were gaslighting her, of being like, okay, just do what they say, participate, look the part, act the part, and it'll be fine. And she's like, no, I literally been doing this all this time for a decade now, and guess what? It didn't get any better for me.
Right.
So I think that that was part of like what was driving her a little bit insane. She was cracking up, so to say, as Maggie says.
Yeah. And I guess to go back to the more like technical aspects of the film, I think that this is kind of out of the blue, doesn't matter, but the jazz soundtrack,
I think
it was very interesting.
It was a very unexpected choice for like a film of this genre, but I think it worked really well.
Oh yeah. And like I had subtitles on, so it always said like discordant jazz.
Yeah.
And you know, like that discord, that kind of like uneasy feeling that it created, that it generated, was so, I felt Diana, you know what I'm saying? Like I felt the discomfort kind of.
Well, I think that it's like, what do you expect out of a princess? You know, you expect her to be, you know, almost like a monolith, basically. Yeah. You expect her to be a certain way, act a certain way, look a certain way, which is always perfect and pretty. And what do you expect out of jazz music? You expect it smooth jazz. Like, not really, I think rock and roll is more about breaking the rules, but I think not really, you know, things that are kind of like chaotic and stuff like that. I think of, you know, a nice, like, smooth like saxophone.
And I think this film did a really good job of using the unique style of jazz to create that kind of feeling as that not many people can really understand.
Yeah, I think that to go along with the music, the color grading and the cinematography was definitely not what you would expect. Things were very cool toned and very like cold, like the feeling that she was being iced out and, you know, left out in the cold by the royal family.
And also that the house was really cold. They wouldn't turn on the heat.
Yeah.
Like it was physically cold.
But it was visually very cold in those moments, and it was warm toned in certain moments when she was outside, when she was driving by herself, when she was driving home with the children. But I thought it was also interesting the like color choices for like her outfits. Like what was she wearing with the family, you know, when she goes and she kind of like bucks tradition or whatever for the photo. She's wearing like blue and white, very like cool icy tones. So I felt like that was definitely interesting choices made by obviously the cinematographer and whoever did the editing.
They also made the people seem very small. Like they had these really big, you know, really expansive shots where it made the people look small in this house, in this mansion, which they were, and how little power they actually had, especially Diana.
Well, I think it's interesting to note that Diana in real life is 5'10" and Kristen Stewart is only 5'5".
Yep.
So I think that, I don't think it was a purposeful like choice of like, let's find an actress who's much shorter. But I think that it definitely helped to make everything like bigger than her because she was obviously a lot shorter, the actress that they chose.
Speaking of Kristen Stewart, I think that her portrayal of Diana was really, really wonderful. It was a far cry from her portrayal of Bella in Twilight.
Well, okay.
Obviously, that was...
I'm tired. I'm so tired of people being like, yeah, and in Twilight, she sucked, or whatever. Like,
I'm not saying
Kristen
she sucked
Stewart
in Twilight.
does not have a very expansive catalog of work that she has done. Just in the past couple of years, she did Seberg.
Right.
She did Happiest Season. She did, years ago, she was in, it was with, I think, Jodie Foster. It was like a film when she was a kid, and she was in an escape room, and her house was being invaded. I don't know if you've ever seen the film, but like she's always shown that she had acting chops, and she always played the part of whatever film she was in that they gave her. Bella is just a very bland character, so she played the part well. It was just like the character was shit. But she has been in like a lot of indie films, a few like French language films since Twilight, and I feel like she's never really been given her flowers, like her credit where it is due as an actress, because people saw Twilight and just kind of wrote her off a little bit.
That's where most people know her, and that's why this film is probably really impressive to most people, because most people do know her in Twilight, and then they see this film and they expect her to be like this character that's, you know, Bella-esque, and it's absolutely not, because
well, she hasn't really done anything similar since then. I mean, it's been a decade now since the last Twilight movie was released, and I think she wanted to kind of show what she could do, and that's why she's been on like the indie film circuit and not really doing like big blockbusters or anything. I mean, this isn't a big blockbuster by any means. It's being shown at the cinema series because not a lot of people in the area saw it. I don't think it was shown in many theaters for very long. So I think that she's a really impressive actress, and she does have the skill and the capabilities, but people just don't know that. I
feel like this film has the potential to kind of ease people back into Kristen Stewart as an actress and kind of make them realize that, you know, she is an actress with, you know, acting chops and abilities beyond who Bella was as a character and how most people saw her. Because I was thoroughly impressed.
This film makes people look at her catalog that she has been doing for years now. She's been doing really good work. It's just been like, again, on the indie film circuit, or just, you know, smaller distributors, or not really shown in theaters that much, except for like the new Charlie's Angels film. So I hope that people will see this and be impressed by it and look at her past work in like the past years since Twilight, because it definitely, obviously she deserves the credit. But also, I wanted to say that the kids who played William and Harry were really good too. Did you know that the scene where they're playing the game, the little candlelight scene, was improv?
I love
they
that. They
knew that, like, they were like, oh, they're gonna be playing this game, but, like, we don't really have lines for you, so, like, improv what you're gonna say.
I love that so much. That's what I was thinking. It was kind of, like, off the cuff. It did seem a bit off the cuff. I didn't think that it was improv at the time.
It did seem like you know, a mom playing with her kids.
Exactly. Like, I felt like that dynamic was really, really shown really well.
Yeah, I agree. And I like that as opposed to a lot of other adaptations of like Diana's life, you don't really see the Queen very much. You don't really see Prince Charles. You don't really see like a lot of other people other than her, and her like internal struggle was portrayed. It was fleshed out a lot more than in the past, because obviously now we're just getting to like talking about her struggles with mental health and everything like that, when in the past that was kind of not something that people wanted to talk about her life. They just wanted to be like, oh, like it's so sad, she was such a great person and she had a perfect life, and you know, what a shame she died too young.
Yeah.
There's a lot of really interesting reviews and like articles about it, so I would definitely say like after the film, if you're interested, like to do a little bit more research about like Princess Diana's life.
Absolutely, because I knew nothing. And I want to know more.
I appreciated the story a lot, knowing more about her as a person, so I definitely encourage people to like kind of look into it a little bit more. But thank you, Sarah, for the discussion today.
Thank you very much.
Again, this podcast is for the Media Production Club here at AU, so if you're interested in participating in any capacity in the club, hit us up on Instagram or email one of us. My email is grolfe@augusta.edu. If you're a student, shoot me an email.
Mine is srish@augusta.edu.
Like our socials are always in the descriptions
right.
of when we post. And thank you to Mr. Williams, everyone here in the TVC lab, as always, for helping us record this today. Thanks to Professor Bazell for picking Spencer for the cinema series, and thank you to the cinema series for putting on the show for us. And as always, thanks to Augusta University for making all of this possible. Go Jacks!